Miss Carter, stand up. She doesn't have a lawyer, Your Honor. Then she shouldn't be speaking at all. A wooden gavel hovered in the judge's hand, catching the pale courtroom light. The air conditioner hummed too loudly, like it was nervous. In the back row, someone coughed. No one else moved. Aisha Carter rose anyway. She was 32. Slim shoulders. Navy blouse with one missing button. Her hands shook as she pressed them flat against the table, as if the table might run away. The bailiff took a step forward, then stopped, unsure. That pause lasted half a second. It felt like a minute. Aisha looked straight ahead, not at the judge, not at the prosecutor, not at the rows of strangers who had already decided who she was. Her eyes fixed on the seal behind the bench. An eagle carved in gold. Its wings spread wide. It didn't look like it was protecting anyone. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, smooth and bored. The defendant has already disrupted proceedings. Disrupted. The word echoed. Aisha swallowed. The sound was small, but the microphone caught it anyway. Somewhere, a pen clicked. Someone's phone vibrated and went silent. She hadn't planned to speak. That was the truth. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, wouldn't beg, wouldn't give them anything they could twist. All she wanted was a continuance. 10 days. Enough time to get the paperwork she'd been asking for since April. But then the judge leaned forward. Miss Carter, he said, voice flat. Do you have anything relevant to add before I rule? Relevant. Her chest tightened. The ceiling lights buzzed. She smelled old paper and floor cleaner. She felt the weight of every eye, some curious, some irritated, most indifferent. This was the moment people later argued about. Some would say she should have stayed quiet. Some would say she was brave. Most wouldn't know the rules she was about to break, or the ones she was about to use. Aisha opened her mouth. Closed it. Then opened it again. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, she said. The judge's gavel lowered an inch. Not a strike. A warning. The prosecutor frowned. In the back row, a woman stopped writing. Aisha took a breath she didn't feel entitled to take. Her voice was steady now. Too steady for someone with nothing left to lose. This next part changes everything, she said softly. Because the document you say doesn't exist was filed. On time. With your clerk. And I can prove it. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. The bailiff looked at the judge. Aisha reached into her folder. No one defended her. Not yet. Enjoying this? Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story. The judge didn't rule. Not yet. He leaned back instead, fingers steepled, eyes narrowing just enough to signal irritation disguised as patience. Miss Carter, he said, this court has no record of such a filing. Aisha kept standing. Sitting felt like surrender. Her knees trembled, but she locked them anyway. With respect, Your Honor, she said, careful, measured, the record you're checking is incomplete. A quiet ripple moved through the gallery. Someone shifted. Someone else sighed. The prosecutor, Daniel Reeves, 45, gray at the temples, smiled as if indulging a child. Incomplete? Reeves repeated. The clerk's system is comprehensive. Aisha nodded once. She had expected that answer. She had rehearsed for it in her car that morning, palms sweating against the steering wheel, the radio turned off so she could think. That system, she said, doesn't log after-hours filings immediately. The judge's eyebrow lifted. Just a fraction. Aisha felt it, the first crack. Small. Fragile. But real. She continued before anyone could interrupt. On April 3rd, at 6:42 p.m., I submitted a hardship extension request using the courthouse night drop protocol. Reeves' smile thinned. There's one problem with that, he said. The defendant is mistaken. The night drop was suspended that week. Aisha turned her head toward him for the first time. Not angry. Not afraid. Curious. No, she said. It wasn't. That was the moment the judge raised his hand. Enough. he said. Miss Carter, unless you have physical evidence, this court cannot entertain. I do, Aisha said. The word landed harder than she expected. The judge paused. The bailiff straightened. Aisha reached into her folder. The cardboard edge scraped softly, too loud in the silence. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. Not the original. A copy. Creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. She held it up, careful not to shake it. This, she said, is the intake receipt. Time-stamped. Initialed. Reeves took one step forward. Your Honor, that document hasn't been authenticated. I'm not finished, Aisha said, then stopped herself. I apologize. I am finished, with this part. The judge gestured for the bailiff. Bring it here. As the bailiff walked toward her, Aisha felt the weight of the last 6 months press into her spine. She hadn't always been here. She used to work mornings at the Franklin County Records Office. 10 years. No write-ups. No complaints. She knew how filings worked. She knew which forms vanished and which ones lingered. She knew the difference between missing and misplaced. And she knew why she was standing alone. The bailiff took the paper, eyes flicking over it. His expression changed, just slightly, before he passed it up to the bench. The judge studied it. Long enough for the room to hold its breath. Reeves leaned in. Your Honor, even if this were legitimate, it wouldn't. Mr. Reeves, the judge said, not looking up, I will decide what it does and does not affect. That shut the room down. Aisha's heart pounded. She pressed her fingers together to stop them from shaking. There was more. She hadn't shown everything. Not yet. Because here's what most people miss. The receipt wasn't the proof. It was the invitation. And if the judge followed it where it led, someone else would have to answer questions they had spent years avoiding. Before the judge could speak again, the clerk at the side desk cleared her throat. Your Honor, the clerk said quietly. May I check something? The judge looked up. Aisha exhaled. If you want the full truth, hit like so this story reaches more people. The clerk hesitated before standing, as if permission itself carried risk. Yes, the judge said at last. Check. She turned to her terminal. The keyboard clicks sounded sharp, almost accusatory. Each tap stretched the silence. Aisha stayed standing. Sitting now would feel like retreating mid-sentence. Reeves folded his arms. Your Honor, with respect, this is unnecessary. The defendant is relying on a photocopy and a story. Aisha didn't look at him. The clerk paused. Typed again. Then stopped. Her shoulders stiffened. There's something unusual, the clerk said. The judge looked up. Unusual how? The clerk glanced toward Aisha. Then back to the screen. There is an entry. It's flagged. Reeves uncrossed his arms. Flagged for what? The clerk swallowed. For manual review. The judge leaned forward. By whom? Another pause. Longer this time. By the records office, the clerk said. Specifically, by a supervisor override. A low murmur moved through the gallery. Aisha closed her eyes for half a second. She had known this part would surface. She just hadn't known when. Reeves' voice sharpened. Your Honor, overrides are routine. They don't imply wrongdoing. Routine overrides don't erase timestamps, the clerk said, surprising even herself. The room went still. The judge held up a hand, not to silence the clerk, but to slow the moment. Miss Carter, he said, were you employed at the records office? Yes, Your Honor. When? Until last October. Reeves stepped forward again. There it is. Conflict of interest. She's accessing internal knowledge to confuse the court. Aisha finally turned toward him. Her voice stayed calm. I'm using public policy, she said. Not internal knowledge. The judge looked at her. Explain. Aisha nodded. Franklin County Administrative Rule 14b. Any filing submitted after hours must be logged within 1 business day. If it's flagged, the original timestamp still stands unless a rejection notice is issued within 72 hours. The clerk's fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved. No rejection notice was issued, she said quietly. Reeves shook his head. That doesn't mean the filing was valid. It means it was pending, Aisha said. And pending filings protect defendants from default judgments. The judge didn't speak right away. Here's the thing Aisha hadn't said yet, the thing she had learned the hard way. Pending filings don't disappear on their own. Someone has to touch them. The judge turned to the clerk. Who authorized the override? The clerk hesitated. Then read from the screen. It lists a supervisor ID. Initials EM. Aisha felt the air leave her lungs. EM. Evelyn Moore. Her former supervisor. Reeves' jaw tightened. Your Honor, this is turning into speculation. No, the judge said. It's turning into a question. He looked at Aisha again. Miss Carter, why were you terminated? Aisha swallowed. The answer sat heavy in her chest. For asking why certain filings were being delayed, she said. Mostly from people who looked like me. The room reacted this time. A sharp intake of breath. A chair scraping back. Reeves raised his voice. That's an allegation, not evidence. Aisha nodded. That's why I didn't lead with it. She reached into her folder again. Not pulling anything out yet. There's one thing I haven't shown you, she said. Because I wasn't sure this court would listen. The judge held her gaze. I'm listening now. Aisha's fingers tightened around the folder. What she was about to reveal wouldn't just defend her. It would expose a pattern. And once a pattern is visible, it can't be unseen. Comment justice if you believe she deserved justice. Aisha didn't open the folder right away. She let the pause do the work. The judge waited. The clerk waited. Even Reeves stopped shifting his weight. Silence pressed down, thick and expectant. This next part changes everything, Aisha said at last. Because this isn't about one document. She slid a thin stack of papers onto the table. Not toward the judge. Toward the clerk. Those are public records requests, Aisha said. Filed over 3 years. Different names. Different cases. Same pattern. The clerk hesitated. Then began flipping through them. Reeves scoffed. Your Honor, this is turning into theater. The judge didn't look at him. Let her finish. Aisha's voice stayed even. I started noticing it while I worked there. Filings marked pending longer than policy allowed. Extensions never acknowledged. Defaults entered quietly. She paused. Almost always, she said, the defendants were unrepresented. And almost always they were black. The word landed without force. Without anger. Just fact. The clerk stopped flipping pages. These IDs, the clerk said slowly, they all route through the same supervisor. The judge's eyes lifted. Evelyn Moore. Yes, the clerk said. Reeves raised his hands. Your Honor, even if true, this has nothing to do with today's proceeding. Aisha turned to the judge. It has everything to do with it. Because my filing wasn't lost. She reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a small, rectangular object. A badge. Her old employee badge. The photo was faded. Her name still legible. I kept access logs, she said. After I was terminated, I requested my own records. Every time a filing was overridden, the system logged who accessed it. Time. Terminal. User. She set the badge down gently. Once. That receipt you saw? She continued. It was overridden at 8:13 a.m. the next morning. From Supervisor Terminal 2. Reeves' voice rose. Your Honor, this is an internal employment dispute. No, the judge said quietly. It's a due process issue. The gallery stirred. Someone whispered, Oh my God! The judge turned to the clerk. Are these access logs verifiable? The clerk nodded. Yes, Your Honor. They're archived. Then retrieve them. the judge said. Now. Reeves stepped back, color draining from his face. Aisha felt her pulse in her ears. This was the part she hadn't been sure would work. The part that depended on someone else choosing truth over convenience. The clerk stood and moved quickly toward the side office. The judge looked at Aisha again. Not impatient now. Curious. Miss Carter, he said. Why bring this here? Why now? Aisha answered without hesitation. Because this courtroom is where the damage showed up. And because no one listened when I reported it internally. She paused. And because I knew someone would be watching today. The judge frowned. Who? Aisha glanced toward the back row. A woman sat there, older, gray hair pulled tight, hands folded over a notebook she hadn't opened yet. She met Aisha's eyes and gave the smallest nod. Reeves followed the look. His shoulders stiffened. There's one thing I haven't told you yet, Aisha said. She isn't just a spectator. The clerk returned, breath quick, holding a printed log. Your Honor, she said. The access logs confirm Miss Carter's timeline. The judge took the paper. And in that moment, the room understood something irreversible had begun. Type yes if you want to see all targets hit at once. The judge read the log twice. Once quickly. Once slowly. The second time, his jaw tightened. Supervisor Terminal 2, he said aloud. Evelyn Moore. 8:13 a.m. Reeves cleared his throat. Your Honor, even if a supervisor accessed the file, that does not prove intent. It proves contact, the judge replied. Which is more than we had 10 minutes ago. Aisha kept her eyes on the bench. She could feel the back row leaning forward. Curiosity had replaced boredom. The older woman in the gallery hadn't moved. Her notebook stayed closed. But her attention was sharp, almost surgical. The judge turned to Aisha. Miss Carter, you said you knew someone would be watching today. Yes, Your Honor. Explain. Aisha took a breath. This was the crossroads. The wrong step here would turn truth into noise. She's here, Aisha said, nodding again toward the woman. Because this court wasn't the first place I went. The woman stood. Gasps rippled through the room. She was in her late 60s, composed, wearing a simple navy jacket. No badge. No insignia. Just posture. Your Honor, she said, voice calm. My name is Margaret Hill. The judge blinked. Ms. Hill. Retired, the woman said. Former compliance auditor for the State Judicial Oversight Office. Reeves stiffened. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Margaret Hill didn't look at him. So is suppressing filings. The judge held up a hand. Ms. Hill, why are you here? Because Miss Carter contacted our office 8 months ago, Margaret said. She provided preliminary documentation. At the time, it wasn't sufficient to open a formal inquiry. Aisha swallowed. But, Margaret continued, she was advised to preserve records and appear in court if her own case surfaced. The judge leaned back, absorbing that. Reeves shook his head. This is a setup. No, Margaret said gently. It's documentation. Aisha spoke again. I was told one thing mattered more than allegations. She paused. Pattern plus proof. The clerk shifted, eyes wide. The judge looked at the logs again. Then at Aisha. Then at Margaret Hill. Ms. Hill, he said, are you stating that your office is prepared to review these records? Margaret nodded. We already have a preliminary file open. That sentence changed the air. Reeves opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had nothing ready. The judge set the logs down carefully. Miss Carter, he said, your motion for continuance is granted. Aisha exhaled, shaky but controlled. And, the judge added, this court is referring these materials to the Oversight Office for immediate review. A murmur swept the gallery. Not loud, but alive. The judge's gavel came down. Once. This hearing is adjourned. As people stood, as chairs scraped back, as the room broke into motion, Aisha remained still for one extra second. Because here's what most people miss. This wasn't the victory. It was the opening of something much bigger. And the people who had hidden behind procedure were about to learn that paper trails have memory. Share this video so communities understand what was hiding. The hallway outside the courtroom felt colder than it should have. Aisha stood near the wall, her folder pressed to her chest, as people streamed past her without meeting her eyes. Some whispered. Some stared. Most pretended nothing unusual had happened. Margaret Hill stepped beside her. "You did well," Margaret said quietly. Aisha nodded, but her hands were still shaking. "I almost didn't come." "That would have been understandable," Margaret said. "And exactly what they expected." Aisha let that settle. Down the hall, Daniel Reeves was speaking in low, urgent tones into his phone. His back was turned, but his posture had changed. Less confident. More careful. That's when the courthouse doors opened again. 2 men entered. Suits. Not rushed. Not slow. Purposeful. One of them showed credentials to the security officer. The officer's expression shifted instantly. The men headed straight toward Margaret Hill. "Ms. Hill," the taller one said, "we're with the Oversight Office. We were notified 10 minutes ago." 10 minutes. That meant the referral hadn't waited. It had triggered something automatic. Margaret nodded once. "Good. You'll want to speak with Supervisor Moore." Aisha's breath caught. Evelyn Moore hadn't been in the courtroom. She'd avoided public hearings for years. But at that exact moment, the elevator at the end of the hall dinged. Evelyn Moore stepped out. Mid-50s. Perfect hair. Neutral smile that faltered the instant she saw Margaret Hill. "Evelyn," Margaret said, polite as ever. "This won't take long." Reeves turned around. Froze. One of the investigators spoke. "Ms. Moore, we need to ask you a few questions regarding filing overrides." "This is absurd," Evelyn said quickly. "I haven't been notified of." "You were," the investigator replied. 8 months ago. Informally. That sentence landed harder than the judge's gavel had. Aisha watched Evelyn Moore's eyes flick, just once, toward her. Recognition. Then calculation. Evelyn forced a smile. "Miss Carter has an axe to grind." Margaret shook her head. "No. She has records." The second investigator spoke now. "Ms. Moore, we also need your access badge." Evelyn hesitated. That hesitation was the tell. Slowly, she reached into her purse. As she handed over the badge, Aisha noticed something she hadn't expected. The badge number. It matched the supervisor ID on the access logs. Here's the twist no one in that hallway saw coming. Evelyn Moore wasn't acting alone. The investigator turned to Reeves. "Mr. Reeves, we'll need you as well." Reeves' face strained of color. "For what?" "For cases you prosecuted," the investigator said. "Where defaults followed suppressed filings." Silence stretched. Aisha felt a strange calm wash over her. Because the sentence she'd spoken in court hadn't just defended her. It had activated a mechanism. A policy written years ago. Ignored until now. And once activated, it didn't stop with one person. It moved outward. Reeves looked at Aisha. For the first time, fear replaced irritation. And she realized. The system hadn't protected her. But it had recorded everything. They were escorted to a small conference room on the second floor. Not handcuffed. Not arrested. But no longer in control. Aisha sat in a chair near the door, hands folded, watching the power in the room rearrange itself. Evelyn Moore sat stiffly across the table, lips pressed tight. Daniel Reeves took the seat beside her, adjusting his tie as if that could restore order. The investigators stood. One of them placed a slim folder on the table. "Ms. Moore, we've reviewed a preliminary sample. 112 cases." Evelyn's composure cracked. "Just a hairline fracture." 112? She repeated. "Over 4 years," the investigator said. "All involving delayed or overridden filings." all resulting in defaults. Reeves leaned forward. Defaults are legal outcomes. Only when filings are processed, the investigator replied. Margaret Hill stood near the window, silent. Watching. Aisha felt the hum of the building through the floor. Same hum as the courtroom. Same building. Different truth. The investigator turned a page. Ms. Moore, you authorized overrides without issuing rejection notices. That violates county policy. Evelyn scoffed weakly. You're talking about administrative discretion. No, Margaret said calmly. You're talking about selective enforcement. Evelyn turned on her. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Margaret met her gaze. I understand policy. Reeves shifted. This is being blown out of proportion. The second investigator finally spoke to him directly. Mr. Reeves, your office benefited from those defaults. Reeves opened his mouth. Closed it. There's one thing I haven't told you yet. The investigator continued. The system logs don't just show access. He slid another page forward. They show annotations. Aisha leaned in despite herself. The investigator read aloud. Hold until deadline passes. Proceed if no counsel appears. Do not notify. The room went cold. Those notes weren't Evelyn's voice alone. They were procedural. Normalized. Margaret spoke again. That language appears in training memos. Reeves' head snapped up. That's not. It is, Margaret said. From the prosecutor's office. The twist was complete now. This wasn't a rogue supervisor. It was a workflow. Aisha felt the weight of it, not just for herself, but for every name in that stack of papers. The investigator closed the folder. Effective immediately, Ms. Moore, you are placed on administrative leave. Your access is revoked. Evelyn sagged back in her chair. And Mr. Reeves, he continued, your cases are subject to review. Reeves stood abruptly. You can't. We can, the investigator said. And we will. Aisha sat very still. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't accused anyone directly. She had spoken one sentence in court. And that sentence had forced the system to look at itself. The investigator turned to her now. Miss Carter, he said, you're free to go. Free. The word felt unfamiliar. As Aisha stood, Margaret Hill touched her arm. This part isn't over. Aisha nodded. She knew. Because when truth surfaces, the first reaction isn't repair. It's resistance. And that was coming next. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves. 3 days after the hearing, Aisha's phone rang at 7:18 a.m. She was standing in her kitchen, staring at a mug she hadn't lifted yet. Miss Carter? The voice asked. This is the Franklin County Review Panel. Her heart thudded. They wanted a statement. Then another. Then copies of everything she had. By Friday, the courthouse felt different. Quieter. Doors closed more often. Conversations stopped when Aisha passed. By Monday, a notice appeared on the county bulletin board. Administrative leave, effective immediately. Evelyn Moore's name sat alone beneath the heading. 2 days later, another notice. Case Review Initiative, Filing Compliance Audit. No names this time. Just scope. And dates. The local paper picked it up, small column, page 3. No photos. No outrage. Just facts. That was enough. Former defendants began calling the public defender's office. Clerks whispered to one another. Old cases were reopened, not dramatically, but deliberately. Aisha testified once more. This time in a conference room, not a courtroom. She didn't embellish. She didn't editorialize. She let the record speak. Daniel Reeves resigned quietly the following week. No press conference. No explanation. Here's what most people miss. Accountability rarely looks like justice on television. It looks like procedures changing line by line. The county updated its filing policy. After hours, submissions were logged automatically. Overrides required dual authorization. Rejection notices became mandatory and trackable. Aisha watched it all from the outside. She wasn't reinstated. Not yet. One afternoon, she received an email from Margaret Hill. "They're considering a consent decree," it read. "And they asked about you." Aisha sat back in her chair. Consent decree meant oversight. Oversight meant change that couldn't be undone quietly. She closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt something loosen in her chest. But the hardest part was still ahead. Because systems can change faster than people. And Aisha still had to decide. What did she want now? Aisha didn't go back to the courthouse right away. For weeks, she avoided the building, taking longer routes through the city, choosing streets that didn't carry memory. Healing, she learned, wasn't dramatic. It was quiet decisions made daily. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. Not an email. A letter. Franklin County seal. Heavy paper. She opened it slowly. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. Institutions rarely spoke that language. But it was something else, an offer. A 1-year appointment. Records compliance advisor. Independent. Protected. She read the line twice. Independent meant she wouldn't answer to the same chain of command. Protected meant retaliation would be visible. Aisha set the letter down and stared out the window. There was one thing she hadn't told anyone yet. She was tired. Tired of being the case. Tired of being the example. Tired of having to be calm so others could stay comfortable. Margaret Hill called that evening. "You don't have to say yes," Margaret said. "I know. But if you do," Margaret continued, "you'll change how this place works for a long time." Aisha thought of the names she'd read. The ones who never had a chance to stand where she stood. "I'll do it," Aisha said. "On one condition." Margaret smiled, even through the phone. "Name it." "I want community observers," Aisha said. "Not just internal audits." There was a pause. Then, "Agreed." The first day Aisha returned, she didn't walk through the employee entrance. She walked through the front doors. Heads turned. Conversations paused. She felt the old tension rise, then fall. Because this time, she wasn't alone. 3 months later. The courthouse lawn was bright with late summer light. A small crowd gathered near the steps, not protesting, not celebrating. Listening. Aisha stood off to the side, hands folded, watching a young man explain how his case had been reopened. His mother nodded beside him, eyes wet, proud and careful at the same time. This was the change no headline captured. Inside, the records office sounded different now. Fewer whispers. More questions asked out loud. A second clerk always present during overrides. Screens angled so no one worked unseen. Aisha walked the halls without a badge clipped to her collar. She didn't need one. People knew why she was there. In her office drawer, the old intake receipt lay flat between 2 folders. She kept it, not as proof, but as memory. The paper had softened at the creases. It no longer looked fragile. One afternoon, the clerk who had first spoken up knocked on her door. "I just wanted to say," the clerk said, "I didn't think anyone would back me that day." Aisha smiled gently. "I didn't think anyone would listen." They shared a quiet laugh. Not relief. Recognition. As Aisha locked her office that evening, she paused by the front doors. The eagle seal caught the light again. Same wings. Different meaning. Dignity hadn't arrived all at once. It had arrived sentence by sentence. Document by document. And it stayed, because this time, it was written down. If this shocked you, comment change below. Final minute. Before you go, like this video if stories like this matter. Comment, what would you have done in her place? Subscribe to True Heart Story, because quiet courage deserves to be heard. Yendi, thanks for watching.